Morning to everybody. I see those coming from South Africa or Europe. Good afternoon. It's just moved into the afternoon. I'm Sharon Constanson. I'm chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce, and we are here today in collaboration with the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce and Industry to bring you 6 different facets towards trade and industry as related to South Africa, and in certain cases, particularly to the Gauteng province as well. So welcome to all of those that are joining us. We've still got many of you coming into the room, but in respect to those that have been sitting and waiting with us, we are going to get started. The man that has changed South Africa, the man who was chosen by the man before him, who made the Rainbow Nation and also changed South Africa. And as somebody said the other day in one of our meetings, we managed to change presidents recently without a single gunshot, which actually sort of in an African context makes sense. In a European or world context, you think that's quite a big statement to make. But we look at some of the shenanigans going around in other parts of the world, and I think what South Africa achieved 3 odd years ago was quite a feat at getting the transition done. If we go back to one of his statements he made in 2018, he made his priorities clear, is to make South Africa more attractive to investors, and to do that through creating market-friendly policies. His main solution is for the social compact, the working together of government and business and labor. And if you have a look at what has occurred through COVID, we have actually seen a dramatic delivery in a lot of partnerships and working with government, and to address some of the really immediate needs that needed to be taken care of. Also, what Cyril Ramaphosa is doing is allowing the institutions to do their job rather than Cyril Ramaphosa, the president, being everything. So Cyril has definitely brought us a new era, and brought with it a change and an opportunity to recoup the time that has been lost prior to his presidency. Today, we're going to be hearing more about South Africa being open for business from 6 panelists. Latta, so if I look at it in groupings, we've got 2 people that are from government connections, that being Latta and Govender. And then we've got from the, let's say the private sector in a broad term, we've got Graham Blackbeard, Robert Moodie, and Francois Basson. And then tying up at the end of our session will be Tshepo Ncube, who is from Absa Bank, who works very, very directly with the corporate world as well. I've overstayed my welcome. You're not here to listen to me. I'm now going to hand over to the Chief Executive of the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Bernadette, it's all yours.
Warm welcome to all participants, distinguished guests, and all our speakers. And we'd also like to thank the South African Chamber of Commerce UK for co-hosting the event today. The Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce was established in 1890, and we're part of the International Chamber of Commerce in Paris. So we have access to about 14,000 chambers globally. And JCCI's focused, we really create a platform for our members where they can engage on the international platform. So we arrange 2 to 3 international events on a monthly basis, where we will invite the ambassador or high commissioner to give an overview on the bilateral trade opportunities available. And it will include a financial institution, a logistics company, and also companies to give their success stories in the region. And we also host events as today. So we really create that platform where our members can engage globally. And JCCI is also very strategic placed, Gauteng really being the engine room of South Africa. So we as a base into the rest of Africa. And JCCI also runs a global business accelerator in partnership with GIZ on behalf of the German government, where we train Black SMEs in every aspect of exporting. And those programs have now been extended to where we specialize in creative industries, agri-processing. We have also set up a woman in business desk. So constantly, JCCI is looking to play a very important role in promoting trade and being a voice for business. We have a very diversified membership base, starting from the large corporate companies to the small SMEs. So continuously, we're looking to cater and equip all our members and SMEs to enter and access new markets. So it's a great pleasure that we're hosting the event today. And I'd like to thank everyone for this opportunity. I'd like to hand over to Sharon now. Thank you.
Bernadette, thank you so much. Nick Latta is the Prosperity Counsellor for the British High Commission. What their focus is partnering with South African government, industry and third sector to promote science and innovation, improve skills in the business environment and liberalise trade between the UK and Southern Africa.
The key question before us today is around, is South Africa open for business? And I thought I might sort of frame it in terms of some of the challenges, what we're seeing more recently, and then what we in the British government and British High Commission here are doing to help support the movement in the right direction. But you could look at the state of the economy, particularly through 2020, and feel that we were in a tough place. Even before COVID hit, you've got debt rising inexorably. We were already in recession. There was a lot of discussion, including through some of these excellent webinars, about the need for economic reform in the country, and load shedding was a perennial challenge. And here's hoping I don't get cut off on the Wi-Fi from another bout today. And then COVID hits on top of that, and you see overall a 7% cut in the economy. And so there's been quite a wave of different factors presenting real challenge to the successful and sunny uplands that I would like to talk about and to see. One of the things that struck me most was that a 7% cut in the decline in the economy last year, although exceedingly severe, feels not that bad in the global context. And critically, if you think that 9% of GDP indirectly comes from tourism, and tourism was decimated, that's actually quite the 7% overall decline is not a bad outcome given the circumstances. But also more significantly, you've got some really bright sparks recently with GDP growth for 21 being upgraded to 4.2%. It's not a full recovery on the 7% lost. But then going back to the tourism story, we still don't have international tourism. So there's still a fair bit of upside opportunity for when international travel comes back. I think you can see some really strong evidence within government, from the presidency, from National Treasury, of some really solid plans for economic reform shaping up, and they are good. And my own particular hobby horse and area of excitement on energy, despite the load shedding, which is a real drag on the economy. Recently, you've seen some real upside. You've had more power being procured this year than in the last 5 years, between the emergency power procurement, between the renewable energy round 5 and another round expected in August. And on top of all of that, which is future delivery, you're actually seeing a whole bunch of renewable energy that was contracted up to 4 years ago coming online in these months. And then last of all, you've got some movement on self-generation, so that those companies that have capital that want to move faster than the economy can invest in self-generating using renewable energy, solar panels on roofs. So the restrictions that had been set at 1 megawatt, which frankly is not really enough for a business, have now been moved up to 10 megawatts. And critically, you've seen the first for a long while approval for a 40 megawatt self-generation project come through out of NERSA and the process of approvals. And we're being told that more are on their way. So that feels like quite an exciting set of opportunities for investment, for business, and actually addressing some of those key problems that I started with. From a UK perspective, first off, our overall approach and relationship with South Africa is, as you said, around promoting mutual, resilient, and inclusive economic growth. South Africa is our largest trading partner on the African continent, 27th in the world, but nevertheless, last year, even through the depths of COVID, we were doing £8 billion worth of bilateral trade. That's a lot of trade and indicative of opportunity. Critically, also, and good for both of us, was the fact that trade is pretty evenly balanced between us. So we both benefit in equal measure from this dynamic trade. We are hosting COP26, the Conference of the Parties in Glasgow later this year, and that is really focusing our minds around climate change and the journey to net zero that we as a globe have to pursue. And again, going back to my point around green shoots, if you like, we're seeing some real movement both within government, but also within the private sector towards a low carbon model, which is really encouraging, really important. And I just wanted to put a particular shout out to Johannesburg Metro for their announcement just recently around their plans to go low carbon as well. We've been working furiously as the High Commission around a range of programs, technical assistance. What that really means is partnering with different parts of the South African system to accelerate these reforms and these changes that South Africa wants to make. I won't talk much about some of them because we have our colleagues from Trade Forward Southern Africa and our partners, Luke Govender at DTIC, on the call. But these are a really important but not a unique part of what we're doing. And we are working with TVET colleges to develop skills around the automotive sector, given how important it is to the economy. There's a huge amount of really exciting work around developing the tech ecosystem through our tech hubs and critically supporting digital access and getting people trained up to work effectively and safely online so that they can access the digital services from government and open and develop their digital businesses. So there's a raft of stuff we're doing, but I'll stop there to see if I've sparked any interest.
Thank you very much, Nick. That was a wonderful sort of summation of various different points, those that we discussed the other day. And it was lovely to hear you sort of bringing them out in full context rather than just the bullets we were chatting about. One question that came to mind, and it's one that I asked at the end of a session the other day, but maybe with your connections to government, we might get a different answer. South Africa's airwaves, however much they are not closed, they are in practical terms pretty close to the UK. One being flights are not flying by British Airways, for example, as direct flights, and the other one with South Africa being classified as a red location coming into the UK. What is happening behind the scenes that we're probably totally unaware of to try and address, is this fair? Is it correct? What's the journey out of it? How is tourism going to be regenerated back into South Africa?
Thanks, Sharon. That's a really good and fair and challenging question. I think the question of fairness is difficult, I'd say, because this is being driven by the science around the epidemiology. And therefore, we have gone through one of the hardest lockdowns. Sorry, you're living it in the UK. You're just coming out the other side of it in a way that friends on this call in South Africa haven't quite experienced. And that has been a consequence of the very steep, very large death toll and risks to our health system that first the Kent variant established, and we are now told very clearly by our medical advisors that the new variants, both the variant found in India and before that the variant first identified in the Eastern Cape, these represent real threats to the plans to reopen the country and the economy, and therefore we have imposed some really tight restrictions on travel from places like South Africa and India and others where these variants dominate. We are going to be some way yet before travel restrictions to red list countries are lifted, simply because of initially the risks to citizens and the NHS, but also ultimately we've got a huge backlog in NHS treatments that we are going to need to address above and beyond COVID. So that there's a slightly uncomfortable moment that this is driven by not by principles of fairness per se, but about what is safe for the UK. Now, what that means for tourism here, one of the little highlights I didn't mention in my how is South Africa responding and where are the green shoots, was the degree to which South African tourism has managed to keep itself afloat despite its heavy reliance on international tourism by turning to the domestic sector. And that's a sort of a celebration of the dynamism and innovation entrepreneurship of that sector to be able to keep going despite the challenges. I'm really looking forward to tourism returning. I'm looking forward to the day when direct flights back to the UK appear, but I haven't huge confidence that that's going to be in the next couple of months.
Thanks very much, Nick. Our time together is over, unfortunately. I'm now going to switch over to Luke, if you'd like to join us. I'm now moving from the UK government, and we're now moving into the South African government side, and we're talking to the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, Trade, Industry and Competition, your new name. Luke is focused on export promotion, export development, and the promotion of outward investment. So he is on the opposite side of the coin to what we've been listening to a few moments ago, and he has deep experience in trade and investment, demonstrated a history in working in policy and strategy formulation, development and implementation of these strategies and policies, skilled in international project management, business case, government, international relations, and business transformation. So Luke, would you like to say a few initial words? I think you have a presentation.
Actually,
to talk.
Sharon, I'd like to just perhaps, give a sense of the landscape in South Africa and the intention of moving into building resilience in terms of economic recovery as well. So if you'd allow me to make a couple of comments around that. I think, perhaps I should begin by mentioning that Africa Day was celebrated on Tuesday, the 25th of May, and the Organization of African Unity was founded on this day in 1963. And we certainly commemorate Africa's liberation, freedom, and independence. It is a day that's celebrated in various countries on the African continent, as well as, of course, in the UK and across the world. I certainly have an affinity to the words of Kwame Nkrumah, who said that, I am not an African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. And I think with those words, I'd like to move then into the economic diplomacy issues that we're discussing today. So certainly, I think globalization is at the crossroads. Isolation, as you and Nick had mentioned, under no circumstances is the prescription to economic resilience. Instead, countries, including South Africa, need to make concerted efforts to improve efficiencies at all levels, be it sourcing, logistics, manufacturing, even to a certain extent, policy provisions and implementation. The South Africa of today is certainly a country in which we are moving towards being a sophisticated, a diverse and promising emerging market. Of course, as you know, we're strategically located on the tip of the continent, as you mentioned, being a springboard into the continent, but it is also a key investment location, both for market opportunities that lies within its borders and the opportunity that exists to use the country as a gateway into the continent. And when we talk about the continent itself, it's a market of nearly 1 billion consumers, notwithstanding the fact that South Africa is also the most industrialized country on the continent. Having said that, South Africa is the economic powerhouse of Africa. It was admitted into the BRIC group of countries of Brazil, Russia, India, and China in 2011. And certainly, our economy is traditionally rooted in primary sectors, the result of wealth, of mineral resources, and favorable agricultural conditions. However, the economy has been characterized by a structural shift in output recently, and economic growth is, although mainly driven by the tertiary sector, which includes wholesale and retail trade and tourism and communications, we are moving towards becoming a knowledge-based economy with a greater focus on technology, on e-commerce, financial and other services. And of course, with an infrastructure-led recovery, and of course, moving towards the green economy, as Nick had alluded to earlier as well. I'd like to, just move on to quickly talking about, our industrialization part that we've embarked on to look at the diversification of products, markets, and suppliers in order to open ourselves up to opportunities and investments coming from leading companies around the world. And we obviously, as economies reopen, that we would like to suggest the rebalancing of the nature of South Africa's trade and investment ties so that it will be sustainable over the long term. And in this context, for both our economies, post the pandemic, South Africa is certainly ensuring structural transformation with our trade with the UK to enable UK to import more value-added and labor-intensive products and to move away from the dependence on raw materials. Nick also alluded to the SACU and Mozambique UK EPA, which is of course mirrored on the SACU EU EPA at this point. And we concluded that agreement to ensure that we protect South African jobs and exports after Brexit, which means we continue to sell cars, fruits, and juices to the UK on preferential terms. Perhaps just to also indicate that, last year we recorded significant trade surplus in our trade with the European Union, and we want to strengthen our manufactured exports further in this sense. I think in terms of, foreign direct investment, the UK certainly remains a major investor in South Africa. We've seen over 345 FDI projects with a total capital investment in excess of 180 billion, thereby creating, a significant number of jobs in the country. I think one of the points that Nick may have not mentioned is that the UK's Prosperity Fund has also agreed to fund 6 projects in South Africa in line with our National Development Plan, which is aimed at boosting inclusive growth as well. I perhaps want to just take a moment, it would be remiss of me not to mention the continent as a whole. And of course, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement offers an opportunity to create larger economies of scale, a bigger market, and improve the prospects of the African continent to attract more investment. And South Africa is obviously committed to a coordinated strategy to boost intra-Africa trade and to build this integrated market as well. I think I'll stop there, Sharon, because certainly, my task was to project some of the opportunities within trade and investment. And of course, maybe perhaps just to say that the implementation work on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement will help to reverse some of the challenges that we face. Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks very much, Luke. It's wonderful to hear the positives, the opportunities, the position South Africa is relative to other emerging countries and where we are positioned relative to Africa. There often is the comment that South Africa behaves as though it's not African, that it's not part of Africa. Just a quick, short response to that.
Certainly. I mean, we recently had taken up the chair of the African Union. And of course, the general sentiment is that we're moving away from this big brother syndrome. And we're looking at, regional value chains, regional integration, the advent of a regional infrastructure, so that we look at the equitable benefits throughout the region. And I think those sentiments bodes well for the Africa Agenda 2063 in terms of the Africa that we would want to see.
The positive part is easily contrasted with a lot of negativity, and one of the concerns raised at a recent reference I was talking about is a lot of the negativities are being dealt with, they're not gone. But the one that is probably still looming, the worst still to be dealt with, is that of energy. And you talked about what Johannesburg Metro is doing. And where do you see, and I know it's not totally your remit, but where do you think the government is on allowing South Africa's energy space to become entrepreneurial and solution-driven?
I think Nick had alluded to, the drive towards the green economy and the renewable sector. And to obviously, as you said, it's outside my purview, but certainly an energy mix is being punted by respective government departments. And we've seen this collaboration. You mentioned earlier on about the social compact, and the social compact essentially looks at the collaboration between government, between private sector, labor, and of course civil society as well, and looking at certain reforms and opportunities within the green economy. And we're starting to see that. I think COVID has exposed a number of issues, including the fact that we need to move towards a climate change transition as well. And so obviously, I think that in terms of economic recovery and growth, and creating an enabling environment for the shift from fossil fuels is certainly helping to create a stimulus for business to participate a lot more actively in providing solutions around that.
Thanks very much, Luke. Very, very interesting session. I think each of these could be an hour long within themselves, but unfortunately you guys all have to share 2 hours. We'll call upon Graham Blackbeard first to join us. He's Managing Director of Southern Implants. This company trades a lot with the UK. Graham developed the company, he's founder of the company, developed the company, which manufactures heart valves, artificial hearts, and a variety of dental implants. 25 years later, Graham is still in the business. They have a significant focus in their company now on international trade, and they have a lot of credible clinical data supporting an extensive, innovative product range.
Probably medical devices are a little different to the rest of trade. And so I'll pick up on a few things that were said by Luke. We've seen a huge move due to the pandemic, possibly in anti-globalization, which I think is quite important to note. This means that every country is trying to put up their own regulatory barriers. They making it more and more difficult to do global trade. And, you know, Brexit is one of them, whereby we used to have to comply with European regulation, but the UK is now going to have their own set of regulation, which again is another thing you've got to comply with, and that you have to do all the regulatory processes through it. And obviously it adds a lot of cost. But we've seen the same coming from Canada, where they demand particular things on your labels, which nowhere else in the world wants. And we've seen the same elsewhere. So my message as a medical device manufacturer is that there's been a huge move in the last few years for anti-globalization and rather regionalization or protection of your own company or your own country. Okay, so my background is in mechanical engineering. I did biomedical engineering in Utah and a business degree at Wits. And I must thank the Rotary Foundation for giving me a wonderful scholarship some years ago. The huge issue around medical devices is regulation. And there we partner very well with the UK. Our regulatory body that we've chosen is BSI. BSI is the biggest regulator of medical devices on a worldwide basis. They're based in Milton Keynes, and they have offices in Amsterdam, and they audit us and certify our products. And for each product that needs certification, costs us now, with the new European MDR regulation, about 750,000 Rand per technical file. And then the annual audits are in excess of R1 million a year. So we are spending this year with BSI over 5 million Rand in regulatory costs. Fortunately, they can regulate us in terms of the USA and various other markets, Australia, Canada, etc. We've been recognized as the most innovative dental implant company, and we spend about $20,000 a month on intellectual property, which is very important in terms of medical devices. It is a wonderful place here for manufacture because we've got good scientists, engineers.
We are literally not hearing you at all, and it's quite frustrating for the audience and equally for the message you're trying to share with us. Next session, Cape Gate and Francois Basson, who's head of export of Cape Gate, an organization that is directly involved on the ground with getting product out the country and is dealing with all the on-the-ground issues right the way from the customs people in the port, the trains, the electricity, all the other aspects of being a successful exporter. So Francois, I sincerely hope you're going to have a better signal than poor Graham was dealing with. So apologies, Graham.
Sharon, I think, thank you very much. I think let me start with the presentation, and we'll see, hopefully the signal will be a little bit more forgiving to me than what it was to Graham. Cape Gate, family-owned business, and that is something that we are very proud of, and needless to say, that's very important to us. It's been established in 1929 down in Cape Town, and we still have the operation there. Cape Gate Sparrow Works, you would all be familiar with these little garden gates made out of flat bar. That's where the company started, and that's where the name comes from, Cape Gate. Having the challenges that we have in the steel industry, it's very important for us to be self-reliant and to be fully vertically integrated. And let me just dwell on that for 1 second. It basically just means that we use scrap to manufacture steel, to manufacture wire rod, to make wire from. we have got steel works that does that for us. In other words, we are relying on ourselves to produce our own raw material. And that has proven to be a successful way of doing business and a successful means of manufacturing. The Van der Bijlpark Works was established in 1962. It started off as a small netting plant, and it's grown, like I said, to a fully vertically integrated steel mill, steel and wire mill. Product range that we produce is all your wire products, all your fencing products. For export purposes, especially to the UK, we concentrate more on what we refer to as processed wire. It's a wire that we export in huge coils to the UK market, amongst others, to be converted into fencing products in those markets. Important to us is that we produce whatever we produce in accordance to recognized international standards, SABS, ISO, and then something we're very proud of is the green certification. Graham has also mentioned that there's a lot of work and a lot of effort that goes into trying to make clean steel. You would appreciate the fact that the steel industry is probably one of the dirtiest industries in terms of carbon footprint. We are aware of this, and we're proud to know and to say that we have been successful in recycling 92% of our raw material. That includes water, so our footprint is shrinking year by year at tremendous cost, of course, but something that we are still very proud of. Countries that we export to, 37 countries. That excludes the African countries. So that is 37 countries in the rest of the world. UK, probably number 3 in terms of size that we export to, and it's been good to us. I'm going to just touch on a couple of restrictions and obstacles that makes it difficult when one wants to enter the international trade arena, and something that we've in principle decided that we are going to try and ignore, trying to really find the best customers that we possibly can. And the UK is rated amongst some of the best that we have. The first thing that we look at is accessibility. We don't really want to trade in a country that is difficult to get to. The UK is easy to get to. If you have a look at logistics, getting, Graham made mention of it, logistically getting stuff into a place like the Ukraine and into Russia, logistically can be very challenging. Subsequently, and again, logistics towards the UK is easy. Language, that basically speaks for itself. Difficult for us to communicate, with people that doesn't necessarily have the benefit of English as a second or a third language. That's something that is important to us. And then in the steel world, the units of measure. We produce in a certain, towards a certain standard. People buy according to a different standard. And it's important that you match these two with one another. We, for instance, would take an order for what we think is 1,000 kgs, and in the meantime, the customer has meant 1,000 pounds. So unit of measure in our world is rather important. A dysfunctional financial sector, and this is probably a little bit of a controversial thing, but that's definitely one of the biggest deterring factors for us when we look at choosing a trade partner in terms of country. If the financial sector of that country is not functional, and if it's a struggle, that's one of the things that deters us big time, and we often would walk away from business based only on that fact. We believe that we sell quality product at a good price, but we don't want to struggle to get payments from the countries that we do export to. In brief, why the UK? I've said they are familiar with steel. They probably know much more about steel than what we do. Hence, it's easy for us to sell into a market that knows exactly what they are buying. They are also producers of quality product, so they appreciate quality raw material. It's easy to communicate with them. Generally, the logistical planning of the UK companies is probably the best in the world. They plan well in advance, which makes life for a producer more like us much easier. They've got a functional and a good functional financial sector. The logistical planning is up to speed and probably also some of the best in the world. The exchange rate, needless to say, is in their favor. It's something that's a big motivational factor for them to look at a country like South Africa for sourcing their raw material. And then the functional sector of ports and customs. It's easy to deal with the Ports Authority. It's easy to deal with the UK customs. It's a straightforward, well-oiled machine, that works well and that we feel comfortable dealing with from a producer more perspective. That's my story, Sharon. Last slide is just to thank you.
Thanks very much, Francois. Graham, would you like to just make a closing comment?
Just to point out the great collaboration. This is Professor Chris Butterworth from Liverpool, the World Authority on Oral Cancers, how to reconstruct people who have cancer of the mouth. And just to show you some of the wonderful stuff that he does, that we develop with him. So we collaborate directly with the UK, with the people in Liverpool on this. This is a radial forearm flap together with a whole lot of our implants to restore a patient who's had their whole maxilla removed due to cancer. So that X-ray shows how construction is done, all of those things we do for them, and then they make that, and this is the final result of the patient. So it's something we pioneered in this country, but effectively the major use of this is at the biggest cancer centers, one of which is in Liverpool and there. So that's just to show the wonderful collaboration that we have, and certainly any questions.
If you just give us you've given us a story of something that has worked well, just in 30 seconds, a challenge that your company has had to master and how you did it.
I think the biggest current challenge is Brexit, with the fact that the UK has now doing their own medical device regulation separate to Europe. And that's certainly a very big challenge to get through.
Thanks very much, Graham, and apologies that you had such a challenging time. I would like to now move over to a company that is extremely interesting, run by Robert Moodie. No, Robert Moodie, you are the lead on access to information and trade promotion. It's a company called Trade Forward South Africa, which has a platform to empower and enable trade more effectively. I'm not going to try and take his thunder as to what that actually means. So, Rob, would you like to join us and share with us about your platform?
Super, thanks very much, Sharon. First of all, wow, just seeing some of the stuff that Graham is showing there. I've known the company for a long time, but this is the fabulous thing about South Africa and the region and Africa altogether. You find the most amazing pockets of excellence that exist, and a lot of people in the world just don't realize it. The level of technology is staggering. Trade Forward Southern Africa, let me just give you a quick overview of it. It's not my focus. The focus is to focus on the information that is available through our Trade and Information Hub. It's a UK government funded program. It's not actually set up as a separate company or entity. It's a program of the UK government. It's a 3-year program running through to the 23rd of March, 2023. And the government of the UK has been very altruistic about it. It's not focused on, it came into play because of the UK's exit from the EU with the rollover of the Economic Partnership Agreement. But the focus is not a narrow focus on boosting trade with the UK. It's focused on trying to build the capability of export companies across the region. And it's not only South Africa. The Economic Partnership Agreement was signed with the Southern African Customs Union and Mozambique, because Mozambique joined the Commonwealth, and it's these 6 countries that are our focus. So it's not South Africa only, if I can put it that way. And a couple of things that link across what everybody's been talking about. Regional value chains are critically important. We have 4 initiatives that we work on. The one that I'm responsible for is access to information and trade promotion. We do also, the important thing, and Graham has hit on it very strongly already, companies looking to export have to first decide, okay, where are the possibilities? And we built in some global tools there to identify potential markets. It's statistical, agreed. It's not directly in market, but it's global statistical analysis provided by the International Trade Center. But once you've identified a market, you need to understand what are the customs duties in the different markets, what are the taxes, whether that's VAT, excise tax, and so on. And then the next level that obviously hits Graham and them very, very hard, or what are the rules, regulations, and particularly the standards, whether it's government standards or even market standards, like the British Retail Council. It's not a regulated standard, but the PRC has all sorts of standards and so on applicable. So it's to provide that information. Now, once you've got the information, it's another factor that you have to be able to meet those standards and regulations and so on. And we can't help everybody across the whole board. So what has happened is we focused on a couple of specific value chains. Most of the value chains have been identified for what is called outsized benefits to women, because one of our initiatives is a very strong focus on getting more women involved in trade. Now, our focus is obviously on export. It's to build the capability of companies across the region. This is the Trade and Information Hub's website. Our focus, of course, is primarily on manufacturing companies across this Southern African Customs Union and Mozambique region. Our focus is on goods trade, not services trade. And what we've done is we've collated an enormous amount of extremely valuable and helpful tools that are out there that, strangely enough, it is remarkable how little companies actually know that these tools are available, and it can fall about identifying, am I ready to export? Where can I possibly find markets? And then where are the markets? So I've got a couple of pages open already. This is particularly aimed at trying to help small and medium companies with information that is critical for export. The first thing we've just built into it is an export readiness checker. I won't focus on that now. But in the process of looking to export, one of the first things is, what possible markets can I look at? So we've built tools in here. I'll just open that up. There are a range of tools there. I've opened up the first one, and I took the opportunity because I knew Graham was going to be on. I just picked dental fittings. It's you can go into the tools and put in what your product is. If you know the HS customs code, you can put that in, or you can do a search. And just for interest, as a South African exporter of dental fittings, if Graham was looking or somebody else was looking to see what markets are the statistically the strongest markets that they could start to look at, this brings it up very, very quickly. Now, the methodology behind it is essentially, if a country like South Africa is exporting a particular product, it means you've got the capacity, you've got the capability. If a foreign country is importing the product, it puts the two together and says, look, they're a big importer, you're a supplier. This is the additional markets that you could target statistically. This doesn't go into the issues of language or the detail of who the competition are. and issues around measurement and stuff like that Cape Gate was mentioning. But it does, and I hope this does kind of rhyme a little bit with what Graham also identifies as potential markets. You can see China comes up, but that statistically, the fact that China is almost impossible to enter for a lot of products, that is something that you find as you enter the market. Now, you can also put into that this is identifying who the key competition would be as you're going out internationally. And again, I hope this kind of sense checks reasonably correctly with Graham that Switzerland is a major competitor, the United States, Germany, Netherlands, Korea, and you'll see the UK down here as well. Without going into too much detail, just picking, I did another example for other companies that might want to look. All you do is you change the product here. There's a lot of berry production in South Africa that's finding good markets internationally at the moment, and a berry producer could have a look, see what the key markets are that they could start to look at to target. Once you've identified what are potential markets you could target, rather than, this is a statistical way of doing it, rather than a bit of a thumbsuck of anecdotal information, or you had a connection in a particular country at some point. This is you taking charge of it for yourself. Once you've identified those markets, we've built into the system as well. I won't go through the other areas, but this is particularly about the regulations that you have to meet. And because this is a focus on the UK, what I've done is I've just opened up quickly. The UK has built a fabulous, and really, I have to give kudos to the UK government, first of all, for putting the money into this program, and secondly, for putting up this extremely, really excellent UK trade help desk. So you can plug into it what your product is. I've already gone through and plugged in, for example, the dental fittings, and it will bring up what the trade status is. You can see there's no import duty for third countries, but there is also indicated that there's a trade agreement with South Africa through the UK Economic Partnership Agreement. So for medical devices, most probably because most of them are bought under NHS or very often for medical equipment and so on, there is no duty on it. Taxes, there's a 20% VAT. Rules of origin, if you're likely to get a preferential treatment, it gives you the rules of origin, how much of the product has to be processed locally in order for it to be eligible for the reduced customs duties. And then key is it'll bring up the various rules and regulations that you have to comply with, the technical standards. Now, just an interesting to note, Graham mentioned that the UK will be developing new medical devices regulations. The part of the process of the UK exiting from the EU and formulating all of these economic partnerships agreements around the world, they've essentially taken over whatever was applicable when the UK was a member of the EU. They still use the EU regulations, but these will change in time as the UK develops its own standards. And I just picked up, again on the berries. If somebody put in there the berries, you could go through and if you know the customs code, you can put it in, or you could just put in the name of the product and it'll pull it up. You have to know what, there are various, I just used the berries, and there are various different biological names. As long as you know the biological name, you can pick it up quickly, and it will bring you through to, again, the trade status, the tariffs and taxes. You'll see any other country exporting berries to the UK would pay a 12% customs duty, but coming from South Africa, because there's an economic partnership agreement in place, you pay no duty on that going into the UK. There's no VAT on it, probably because it's a food product. And then the other measures, or if you claim to be an organic supplier, the conditions there for organic certification, the rules of origin. If you're sending the product unprocessed, well and good, but sometimes, people add sugars and so on, and no more than 20% by weight should be sugars. And then you get to the product-specific regulations. You can open up each of these. They're all the rules on the contaminants on foodstuffs, control of pesticides, health control on foodstuffs of non-animal origin. This stuff is incredibly valuable. The exporters, I've been in export promotion for 30 years or more, and it used to be a nightmare to try and get this information. And it's readily available online now. And if anybody is connected to companies that are looking to export, please do direct them to the Trade Forward Southern Africa Trade and Information Hub. It's very simple. It's just TF or Trade Forward southernafrica.org, and play around with it there.
Sorry, can I interrupt you, please, Rob?
Sure.
Can I ask you one question before your 2 minutes are over? May I?
Sure.
If you look at the time that you've been involved in trade, and trading particularly with the UK, what have you seen as a journey of transition and improvement or worsening around the whole trade ability to trade for South Africa as an exporter of goods rather than raw materials?
Yeah. Sharon, a very interesting question, and it's something that frustrates me on a daily basis, with the whole move to globalization through WTO and everything. And I was involved when I was in the DTIC in the negotiation of the Trade Development and Cooperation Agreement. And, it's very often launched as, wow, markets are open now. There's no duties payable. You don't have to pay customs duties. That's great. But in the 30, close to 40 years that I've been involved now, what has really come up is the non-tariff barriers and the technical barriers to trade. Customs duties are an element, but as that's kind of reduced, what really has come up is the non-tariff barriers and the technical barriers to trade. It's usually around consumer protection and so on. And that adds probably even more cost than customs duties into the business cost of getting into an export market. This is not just the UK, it's global. And, it's, how can I put it? It's a little bit, I have to be careful how I say it, but it sometimes can be a little bit hypocritical, if I can put it that way. But all countries are like that.
And does South Africa do the same thing, stopping imports coming in for its own protection in our way? Do we create barriers to other countries' exports into us?
Every country does. It's usually not put up as a protectionist measure. Some countries are reasonably open and honest about it. But, in terms of WTO rules, you can't do it as a protectionist measure. You can only apply safeguard measures if there is a flood of goods into the market, and then you can increase tariffs and put in quotas and so on. But the non-technical barriers and the technical barriers to trade, they're not generally put forward as a protectionist thing, but they have a very, very strong protectionist element. I mean, mostly they are protection of consumers, protection of health, protection of agricultural industry, not protection of the industry, but protection from diseases. But they do act as a real impediment.
That last bit was interesting, yes.
Yeah. Nobody puts it up as a protectionist measure. It's never, you'd be shot down if it was actually openly acknowledged as a protectionist measure, but it has the effect of being protectionist.
Thanks, Rob.
I hope that gives you an answer. South Africa tends to be fairly open. I'm pretty much done there. If anybody is looking to export, what has made a little bit of complication is when goods are transited through the EU to the UK, for example. If you've got a container of goods that are just going through Bremerhaven or through Antwerp and going straight onto the UK, no problem. But if you have broken consignments, that does start to become an issue, because then the rules of origin kick in.
So if I may ask you to complete, thank you very much. Appreciate what you did. It was very, very interesting. And now turn to our last but not least speaker, who's going to talk to us from another perspective, very different again to what we've been talking about before. Tshepo Ncube is a fascinating lady. We've had some interesting conversations before now already, and very insightful into her international and local banking career, where she's worked with corporates for more than 20 years who are involved in international trade. And if there's anything big going on in South Africa in terms of any form of flows in or out the country at a corporate level, you know who to phone next time, the lady in red. So thank you very much.
Representing ABSA, by the way.
Yeah,
so
yes.
I see everyone had, their brands at the back, and I decided I was going to represent ABSA with my red blazer.
You did it very successfully. And you've been with a number of international and local banks, and as you say, currently working with trade and investments in Gauteng for ABSA. So thanks very much. Welcome. In your role working with the corporates of ABSA, you see the nature of inbound investment that is occurring, where it's going to in South Africa, what kind of industries it's going into, and what kind of cycle of change in this investment has been occurring over the last 10 years. Yeah, what was happening 10 years ago? What is happening now? And has the change in president and inverted commas being open for business, have you seen a difference in your customers and therefore your day job?
Definitely seen a difference. I mean, when you kicked off, you spoke about, the people voted for their president. And I think we went through a period of what you call Ramaphosa, and obviously COVID happened. I mean, we were looking for that savior that was going to take us out, of an economy that wasn't doing so great. So when you look at 2010 going into 2020, let me start with 2010 up until 2017, where we saw a lot of FDI outflows. And then in 2018, where President Cyril Ramaphosa, as you mentioned earlier on, was on an ambitious drive to secure 1.2 million trillion investments into South Africa. Then that changed. We saw inflows of about 18 billion in 2018 when that conference took place. That almost doubled in 2019. And in 2020, in a year where we had COVID, where we had a lockdown, that actually almost quadrupled to about 80 billion of foreign direct investments. So the South Africa FDI trends dropped significantly between 2010 to 2017. And then when you have this president who comes up and says, you know what, we need to attract investments into the country, you see that change completely.
The stats you were announcing that you're talking about 80 billion, is that rands you're referring to?
So I'm talking about rands.
Right, okay.
So if you look at 2010, so 2010, our FDI was around 20 billion. And then 2011 sort of went up to about 20 something billion, 20 something plus. And then 2012, that dropped actually below the 20 billion. 2014, it became a negative outflow of about 20 billion rands.
Wow.
Then 2015, I mean, that went to almost 60 billion. 2017, that was a shocker. It went to almost 70 billion outflows.
Wow. And now we've turned it around to 80 billion inflow. That's a
so now
huge
we've
movement.
Around, yeah.
Huge movement.
Definitely.
You've given us some idea of the volumes in what we've just shared together now. What sort of kind of activities is this investment generating in the country? Where are we seeing any potential labor improvement? Where are we seeing more manufacturing, more industry, more industries? What's changing on the ground? And if you've got any names of companies you can legally share with us, please do.
Sure. So if you look at 2018 to 2019, the South Africa Investment Conference generated about 664 billion pledges. So those were just pledges before COVID happened. The likes of Anglo America pledged about 71.5 billion. Mercedes-Benz pledged about 10 billion. Toyota came in with 2.4 billion, and Ford also investing about 15.8 billion. The likes of Naspers and Aspen, local companies, pledged about 9.4 billion collectively, while the paper and timber, Sappi and Mondi, announced billions of rands of investments. We haven't seen some of these come through because of 2020, but we surely will see some of these in the near future come through. And also to add, we had Pepsi finalizing the purchase of a local company, Pioneer, we had an inflow of about 26 billion. And quite recently, as in last week, we had a SENS announcement on Heineken on a bid to buy Stellenbosch Distel. And then if you look at the mining sector, the likes of De Beers are now in the process of developing underground mining, and they're looking at investing at around $2 billion. So this is not rands, it's dollars. There's also an additional 6.5 billion rands that's coming through this project to expand the lease area of Richards Bay minerals and increase mine life by a quarter of a century. So I know one of the speakers spoke about, the mining sector. Its shine was taken away from it because of regulation. The opportunities come out of that sector. Thank you.
There was an interesting list of names, well-known names to all of us, and I think the numbers just tell us a story that counters some of the negatives we always hear. Just carrying forward on South Africa is open for business as per Cyril Ramaphosa's efforts, and his focus has been on trying to energize and to simplify the red tape that exists within the South African governmental regulatory space. Where have investors been most challenged relating to this red tape, for want of an example? And what sort of delays does it occur? What sort of regulatory changes are in the pipeline potentially? And what is government, to your knowledge, doing to help the foreign direct investment to be increasing rather than decreasing?
Yeah. I'm going to touch on, the red tape. I mean, if you read the president's speech, he admits to the red tape. I mean, we are aware of this, and there's a couple of reforms that we're looking at in terms of changing some of these red tapes. So a couple of examples is something that you'll think is so simple, like registering a company can be so complex in South Africa. Most corporates complain about the lengthy process. The memorandum of incorporation may require a greater degree of consideration from the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission, CIPC, which can then take up to 80 days to register the company. There are also costs associated with the registering the company. And then I'm going to move on to one that I'm currently dealing with, ExCon regulatory requirements. If concluded in a certain, obviously when you look at, the banks, the banks have a mandate to look at, some of these ExCons. And if it's within the bank's mandate, it takes about 24 to 48 hours. If it's then escalated to the Reserve Bank, it can take about 4 to 6 weeks. If there's additional questions, so like, going back and forth, that takes about 4 to 6 months, quite a long process. And then we have the broad-based Black economic empowerment, a central part of the government's economic transformation strategy. It's multifaceted, which it has been adopted with a number of components to aim to increase a number of Black people being South African citizens who have been racially classified as African, colored, or Indians. Foreign entities that operate in a registered branch office or a subsidiary in South Africa are required to comply with BEE or BEE codes. Foreign entities that are exempt from the compliance, they are subject to the same criteria as other South African entity. For foreign entities, that the most difficult elements to meet are often ownership and management control as a result of global restrictions on ownership and the management of control that can be transferred to a South African entity. I also just wanted to touch on the mining sector. The mining sector is not as cumbersome as the other sectors. The regulation there is a bit light, so it doesn't require a lot of processes to follow in terms of BEE.
South Africa is not necessarily rated as a high-ranking country to do business with, so very similar to our question before. And therefore, on the ease to do business is sitting in a place we'd rather not be. What sort of changes does corporate South Africa want from an export point of view, investors want from an import point of view? You've talked about two regulations, ExCon and Black empowerment. Are there any other things that are quick wins that corporates could be advising government that could quickly be removed to make the journey to a ease to do business easier?
So South Africa, I mean, I was listening to Graham, and he spoke about some of the challenges, that he has in other countries. And if I look at South Africa's open investment regime, it's another key strength of its economy. I mean, they're open to doing business. The World Bank's 2020 Ease of Doing Business Index ranked South Africa as 13 out of 190 economies for the protection of minority investors. And then the OECD's 2018 FDI Regulatory Restrictiveness Index ranked the country 14th out of 34 non-OECD economies. That being said, South Africa's overall ease of doing business is ranked 84, and which is much less favorable. But based on my experience with corporate clients, the challenges that come with registering, business taking longer, as previously mentioned, there's opportunity for the DTI to automate the process. I mean, we're going into a digitization world where everything is digital. And then when it comes to Excon, there's also another challenge, in terms of giving banks, there's an opportunity to give banks full mandates to reduce some of the headaches that come with SARB. So those are the two that I've actually come across. And I think if we can, sort of come up with ways to solution some of the challenges, then it will make it easier to come into the country and do business.
I think you've been listening to telephone calls of mine. Those are two challenges that I have and customers and members of ours that really are struggling with, is how it just takes so long to do what seems so simple. So totally respect and understand.
So much documentation, yeah.
A huge amount of it.
Yeah.
What sectors, given the change in numbers from 2017 to now in the foreign direct investment now having turned back around and coming in, what do you think are likely to be the volume changes in the next 3 years? And what sectors do you think are going to flourish the most with investment interest?
I'm actually going to talk about, what ABSA has been doing. So I and the bank believe there's opportunities across a range of the key sectors. And some of the sectors that the president also touches on his keynote address. I think it was Nikki who spoke about the tourism sector where it's been decimated. We still believe that some of those sectors are still intact. And in some cases, the business case has actually accelerated and moved forward. For instance, the TMT sector. I'd like to think the sectors we've chosen to focus on still remain relevant. We believe opportunities that still exist over the next couple of years. For instance, I know there's one of the speakers that spoke about the retail and consumer sector. I think it was Luke. The agri sector, where we have substantial arable land where people still need to eat, and it's sector for driving exports. I mean, we did a lot during the lockdown in terms of exporting some of our agri products. As given that there was also a period of uncertainty, the sector, so that's the mining sector where there's been a period of uncertainty. There's potential in that sector as well. And if I look at the FIs, Luke touched on this as well, both very important catalyst sectors to support and grow the development of the country. They are key providers of capital, also gateway to other African countries. And I think Luke touched on that as well. And I think the telecoms, someone spoke about e-commerce and the way we do things now. You and I are talking virtually, and there's a lot of opportunities in that sector. And I also like to touch about the renewable energy. A couple of the speakers spoke about this as well. We'll continue to do well. The Minister in the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy is actively pushing through legislation to lift the threshold for self-generating captive power generation licenses. We're seeing a number of captive power projects planned in the mines, in the commercial and industrial space. Despite the challenges, SA still remains as one of the largest regions in terms of rolling out power over the next several years. If you look at Eskom, there's obviously going to be an opportunity to replace some of the energy from Eskom. So here's an opportunity. And I also wanted to also touch on the government. They've announced that they wish to tap into triple Ps for several projects across infrastructure, in addition to power, just like I mentioned, water, rail, roads, and healthcare. So definitely lots of opportunities in that sector.
I'm going to jump to our last question. We're down to our last 3 minutes, and this has been so insightful. I'd rather we weren't having to do this. Very, very interesting, Tshepo. I'm just going to cover something around, as a result of COVID, airwaves have been closed. And yet you've seen an ongoing increase in foreign direct investment during this period. As the airwaves open up, do you think there will be an almost sort of immediate potential correlation of energy, the people energy, into this foreign direct investment at that point in time? Because we're still humans, we like to have contact with one another. How are your corporates feeling about, are things still on hold a little bit, or are they managing 100% in the Zoom environment or Teams?
So I think the corporates, most of them have come out of this, double whammy. We had a downgrade, during the COVID lockdowns. And, from what I've seen in terms of most of the clients that I look after, it's going to take them time to actually go back to the numbers that they were at in 2019. But when I look at appetite for investments in terms of South Africa, it's an emerging market with robust legislation that protects foreign investments, and not to mention world-class infrastructure. I think somebody mentioned that as well. This makes South Africa attractive to investors, and opportunities for growth exist in the oil and gas, like I said, renewable energy, manufacturing, telecoms. But also to mention that the government is also hard at work on a set of reforms. And I think once Cyril Ramaphosa works on that, we're going to see an inflow. I mean, we are competitive enough, we are attractive enough to pull through opportunities. Cyril Ramaphosa has also spent time, looking at some of the corruption that has happened in the country. The likes of Zondo Commission and the recent tough stance on its members by the ANC has been set aside, and there's also a budget for the Special Investigations Unit that's looking into some of this corruption. If it comes to SARS, they are looking at tightening up the tax leakages, EDC. We acknowledge that this is going to take time, but once that's sorted out, I'm definitely seeing South Africa come out of this. If you also look at the numbers, it shows you that some of the inflows that came through, it's actually companies that have subsidiaries in South Africa, and they really believe in South Africa. They really believe that there's opportunities. And this is why they're backing some of the corporates, especially in the multinational space.
Thank you, Tshepo. You left us on a very, very positive note, and I appreciate you doing that for us. Thanks to everybody, and in the good South African style, we'll say thanks to all the panel. It was really a spectacular show of such varied, such diverse input and interests. And as from the South African Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to say thanks to all our attendees who survived the 2 hours. And if I could just hand over to Bernadette for the last goodbye.
Just a big thank you to all the attendees, and then also to the guest speakers. It was outstanding, the input we received today, and then also to Sharon from SA Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for facilitating the event. You did an amazing job, and thank you so much. And thank you to all the guest speakers as well. Today was really a very beneficial event, and we can all take something back with us. We can apply it to business and just see how our businesses can grow. And thank you once again for a very successful event. Thank you. And we look forward to our future collaboration.
Thank you. We will be sending out contact details as approved by our panelists to everybody. Thank you very much to everybody, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day.